I do remember the Use Think protest. I was down there protesting. We got tear gassed and sprayed with water pretty quickly. Like, they turned violent super, super quickly. This time, this year, every time that they almost turn violent, they don't. I mean, there is some stuff, don't get me wrong. There has been some... when you see what happens in Iraq and Iran, we're lucky. We don't have 500 people who died protesting, just trying to ask for their rights. Every time that it's not violent, every time that no one dies, every day that actually no one dies, like, it's a little miracle. Marie-Jose Daoud, co-founder at Labneh, in fact. Before the Use Think protest, I wasn't living here. I spent 2 years in the US, so I had lost touch with whatever happened. Right. So when I came back from the US, I was like, oh wow, what happened? Like, when I left in 2013, the country was going through a crisis, but it was kind of still manageable, or I don't know, maybe I was getting used to it, I don't know. But then living 2 years in New York, where everything goes so fast and progress happens on a daily basis. And then I get back to Beirut, and we can't have our trash picked up.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, the trash problem in New York is also a very big problem, but it's a different kind of. It's more of a mentality. It's more of a mentality on how to deal with trash in the US, and also some structure stuff. But here it was like, I mean, come on, we know how to deal with it. The trash thing is like, seriously, we can't even sort out our own trash or pick up our own trash, or like, that was, for me, that was the time when I'm like, if our politicians are not able to collect trash, what are they here for?
But I like that you came back and were dissatisfied with the local issues.
Yeah.
Before that, up until 2013, did it affect you the way it affects you today? Because the corruption level has been horrible for almost decades now, right? Yeah. So the corruption, we got used to it, unfortunately. But did you sense when you came back the same kind of anger that you do now? And was it there before you left? Because I like what you said, that we got used to a certain level of dysfunction.
Yeah.
Did it maybe affect you more with those 2 years abroad and then coming back?
Oh, definitely. Because I could see the potential abroad. I could see what we could do, right? I could see how fast the world was going and how we were definitely not going anywhere forward, and we were definitely going to sink somewhere.
Yeah.
It affected me a lot in 2015. I actually had to leave the country because I couldn't stomach it. Like, literally, I had to leave.
You left following the
trash crisis. Like, 2015 came back, and I had to leave like 1 month or 2 months later.
Focus has become so inward.
Yeah.
And I don't remember a time that it's been that focused on local issues. And I mean, because these other demonstrations, even though there were local components to them, that in particular the Use Think movement, but including March 2005, there was a local element to it. But it seems like this one is purely about accountability.
True. So before the US, I lived here from 2009 to 2013. I was a journalist at Le Commerce du Levant, right, covering economy and business and stuff like this. And already I
think that's how we met, because
Actually, no, we met with Walk Beirut.
Okay, yeah.
I did a tour.
Okay.
And then maybe I interviewed you after.
Sure.
Yeah. I think maybe I did that.
That sounds right.
That was not for Le Commerce, that was for Lorient Le Jour Junior.
Right, I was in the kids section.
You were.
I was that well respected, so we're going to put you in the...
It's the Walk Beirut stuff. Like,
sure,
they have the interesting...
Yeah.
I mean, sorry, but Lorient Le Jour Junior has super interesting stuff.
I'm sure. I'm glad. I'm honored. Well, I trust it was okay because you were the one writing it, so I assume, it wasn't...
I'm actually not sure, because I think you were one of the first people I interviewed. So
well, the good news is we met before all this happened.
Yes.
Okay.
And I do remember my editor-in-chief saying, we have a problem. We're not investing in our infrastructures. We're not investing in basically sustaining this country. And even though it still functions now, because we have people who are sending money from abroad, or because there is some legacy, at some point it's not going to function anymore. And I believe that this is what's happening right now. It's not functioning anymore. Like, it's been years since we haven't invested properly in anything related to infrastructure. Like, even telecom, which is kind of working, is not working as well as in other countries.
Right.
It's
quite telling that was the final, trigger, because
straw.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. If these protests work, if they succeed, we have a beautiful opportunity to try stuff, right?
Yeah,
right?
That's
to
true.
Create things. Nothing's going to be perfect. Let's be clear. But I mean, come on, we're in a country, no, in a region, and even in the world where we are ruled by fear, like fear of the other, fear of extremism, fear of religion, of etc. We have a beautiful opportunity to try to create something not out of fear, but out of, we have a small country, let's make it function, because seriously, it hasn't functioned for the past 30 years, so let's do something. That's totally idealistic, I know, but the opportunity is here.
And it exposes how fundamental this stuff is. It's just basic necessities. I think it was shared all over social media and on the news what flooding looks like in Beirut. I mean, but
it's been the case for the past 10 years.
Absolutely, and it's been the case probably even longer. But just the fact that we got used to it, and now we're not. We're noticing it maybe in how bad it got over time. But that's a way for me to address what you do. And I've enjoyed talking to, I'll use this term carefully, alternative media sources. I don't know if that's the actual term.
Well, as long as it's not mainstream, it's alternative, apparently.
Oh, that's the only insult I could say? That's funny. I was trying to be extra careful. Turns out that's the swear word.
That's fine.
Alternative media in all its aspects, whether it's citizen journalists on the street who have no credentials, they're just there with their phone, whether it's something a little more structured like Megaphone, or it could be even Mashallah News, and we talked about that before. I want to maybe get your perspective on the way the average person is getting their news. And do you think that is part of this story, that people are able to see instantly how bad things are all the time, and that maybe that wasn't so accessible before? The flooding images, I mean, help me with this. The first time I remember watching these kinds of images was, I think, on just local news at maybe small intervals. It wasn't nearly as dramatic. Okay. It was just almost like a footnote of the story, that there was flooding in parts of Beirut. And that could be maybe 15 years ago.
Okay.
And not that long ago, these were kind of suddenly in your phone, that you can watch this. And now, it's not just that. It's that we're all sharing this all the time with each other. So it feels like it's a 24/7 data feed, that we're always sort of immersed with data. Do you sense that may have pushed people to expect more in a shorter period of time? That now when there's a flood, whether it's in Beirut or elsewhere, that people express their disdain faster, and they can point the finger quicker, and everyone's kind of in on it together. It's almost like it's
a bubble.
Well, it's a bubble, but it seems to be whatever online power means, it seems to be a fairly effective bubble at spreading an idea and getting a message across.
True, but it's been the case. It's been the case since actually Facebook started, kind of. Now it's even faster because everyone is on Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp. Don't forget WhatsApp.
Absolutely, yeah.
WhatsApp has been crucial for this revolution. The feeling that I have is that these images are being shared to highlight or to pinpoint stuff that we already believe in, right? So we're sharing images of the flooding because we want to show that the government hasn't done everything, because we want to show that the government hasn't done anything for years, and that's actually a very simple way to show it, and that's proof, don't get me wrong. But what I'm trying to say is that, for example, this kind of flooding, ask Soraya, my partner, she's not here, but 2012, first rain of the season, she got stuck in the tunnels of Nabatieh for 7 hours. So these happened before, right?
Oh, sure. I think they've been happening
For a very long time.
Since the Civil War.
True, but what changed today is the interest of people in this. I don't know, I feel that there is a whole blaming of the government that's happening these days, which is a good thing, let's be clear.
But is that because alternative media is now part of the story, that there is a way to blame local leaders that wasn't easily accessible before?
There is one, that's for sure, yes, because you couldn't do that on TV before, that's clear.
WhatsApp is as neutral of a body as possible. I mean, if people are being blamed, it could be the average person, or it could be somebody high up the chain.
Totally true.
Yeah.
No, definitely, like, because local media is owned, at least most of it is owned by politicians or businessmen, right?
Sure.
So you couldn't really do this kind of thing. I mean, you could. There has been some attempts. But it's not as effective as showing a video and having people just go emotional on it, right? Emotions are a huge part of the narrative these days.
Not one TV station could have come up with Killon Yani Killon.
No, that's people in the streets.
That's citizen journalists, I think. I mean, that's literally just a group of people communicating a message. So that's do you see it as a political part of the story? That
the Killon Yani Killon?
The means to media that we can now, all of us can share a video of the flooding and blame
people.
The people or the person that we couldn't easily do this before.
That's empowerment. That's basically empowering people with finding proofs or showing stuff, right? And telling narratives that were not told on social media, on traditional media. You can. Social media allows you to create or show the narrative that you want to show. And it could be an experience that you're living every day that no one covers, that's for sure. Right. It could also be used from the other side to manipulate and misinform.
Right. The other side here meaning the
people who...
The status quo defenders and... So, but I mean, you tell me if I'm wrong, that they're... understanding of social media is curtailed a bit. If
you talk to Jean Assir from Megaphone, he will tell you no. That he will tell you that they have an amazing understanding of social media, and that the message that they're spreading, especially through WhatsApp, are really well tailored.
That's interesting. So their ability to use WhatsApp is
apparently higher than ours.
I wouldn't have even guessed that.
But that's Jean who says it. I don't know. But what I do believe is that if we are really good at using WhatsApp for our own purposes of, like, for example, I have groups, we share a lot how to help, who you can help, look what happened here, and these are facts about corruption and stuff like this. If we can do that, there is no reason that the people that we don't agree with cannot do the same things, because it's very intuitive. Like, WhatsApp is zaps, and WhatsApp relies on emotions. It's like you share something that's striking, and then we all function in the same way. Let's be clear.
And your own personal contribution to this sort of narrative, what took you from commerce, business, journalism, to, in a sense, in a way, storytelling, not traditional sort of boring news of the day? To me, there's like almost a nice sort of jump from boring news that we need, that's important.
They're very important,
important, in-depth economic, let's say, information that is maybe sometimes lacking too much, and maybe it's not too central, it should be. But from there to kind of creating narrative arcs and sort of reinterpreting the emotions and kind of taking them on your own platform. What took you that way?
I really loved working for Le Commerce du Levant, because I actually learned about Lebanon in a way that I would have never dreamed of learning about. Like, in a funny way, I do believe that economics or business are fascinating, and it's actually our daily life, except that we don't understand the whole concept and the whole thing, right? And working as a journalist allowed me to ask questions, to understand this kind of stuff, and try to make sense of it. Problem with traditional magazines writing is that it's very dry. So not a lot of people will read what you write. And even myself was like, sometimes I used to read I mean, sometimes I read the articles I used to write before. I'm like, it's very factual and it's really well researched, but it's not interesting. It's not. I really need to sit down and be focused, etc., to understand it.
Because it is almost like a research paper.
It's almost like a research paper, and that's the basis of journalism. Let's be clear.
Sure.
Like this is how we're supposed to start our work. Then I went to the US and I actually did a master's in journalism in the US.
Where?
Columbia, New York. The US is big in storytelling. Like the US journalism is about storytelling. It's about the human side of the story, about making something human so that people can relate to it.
Yeah.
So that for me was first fascinating. Second, it reminded me of fiction, actually. And I used to I still love fiction, and I used to love writing fiction when I was a kid.
So they encourage you to write as if you're writing a prose as opposed to just...
They encourage you to write with emotions. So it's very structured. It's actually very processed, and it's a very rational process on how to include emotion into a very dry article so that people can relate to it and can be compelled to read it, etc., etc. It's a process that takes time to master.
But it's unrelated to your previous work here.
It's unrelated to my previous work. I mean, it's still journalism, right? But it's journalism. Right. It's human-based journalism, I guess, or it's. I wouldn't even know how to explain it, but it's instead of starting an article with 50% of the population lives under the poverty level, which already is like, oh my god, you start with this week I couldn't buy food for my kids and I'm heartbroken.
So they would encourage a more human...
They would encourage a more human component to the story in a very structured and processed and rational way, in a way. So that was the US, right? So
was that something you found appealing as somebody who would stay in that career? Did you find that to be
I'm a nerd for facts. I love hardcore facts, but that's efficient. Telling a story in a human way is efficient. People relate. People care. People will you do journalism because you want to change the world. Let's be clear. You're more likely to change the world if people care about your story. Human stories are a way to make them care about stuff that they don't care about.
And Labneh in Facts would start when you came back.
Kind of. So I came back, I left, and I came back. And Labneh in Facts started when Soraya came to me, and she's like, "Hey, we're both journalists. We both don't like the news here. Why don't we start our own newspaper?"
Okay, so you wanted that human component to be central to the story.
There was a deliberate attempt to move away from traditional reporting.
And okay, so that was the big no. Don't do traditional reporting.
Like we started on Instagram. We literally started on Instagram only. When we started Labneh in Fact, I was really passionate about the innovation part of it, about, hey, let's change the way we tell stories. We don't need to write 300 words because that's the only space we have. Maybe we can write 800, so maybe we only need like 5, I don't know.
Yeah.
And images and videos and stuff. Like I was really interested in the innovation part of it.
So social media from the beginning?
From the beginning. We started on Instagram and then Facebook.
And that's going back 2016, 17?
2016, May 2016.
May 2016. Your first post is on Instagram.
Yes.
To me, it's still astonishing to hear that. Because I know that that's become the norm. But I still find it a bit bizarre that a news outlet, quote unquote, starts on Instagram.
and we didn't have a website for 2 years.
Wow. That's incredible. So your in-depth reporting would be just the text of the post? Or then would you use Facebook for that? Or is it simply just Instagram?
So it's Instagram, Facebook, it's almost the same content for how do you say that? For resources reason. Like we don't necessarily have the time to do different stuff, but also because it functions.
Right.
But the in-depth reporting, so we started doing in-depth long-form investigation in 2018.
So literally you just put the photo, write the post, and that was it. That was your reporting.
Yeah.
So really the phone became everything?
No, it was still a computer.
Okay, but
Because
you,
it's
yeah,
but,
sure,
but
sure.
everything is meant to be read on social media,
social media,
meaning
yeah.
on phone, because I think it's 80% of the readers who are checking their social media on phone. Yeah.
Right. Is there a financial model that is secure and depending on Instagram? No, and I'm curious because
on Facebook. No.
I don't. Correct me if I'm wrong. There's no financial reward for Instagram, or there's very little.
So there is, but it depends how you. So it's not traditional stuff, right? It's not.
It's not based on clicks or
No,
whatever.
it's not based on. What it is based on is actually on a mix of reach and engagement and stuff like this. So to give you an idea, one of our sources of revenue is actually we produce content for NGOs or actually people who want to do good.
Right. Okay.
And we offer them to publish their stories on our platform, so Facebook and Instagram.
Yeah.
And this space, which is kind of like an advertising space that we call the great sponsored content, this space is valued by Instagram and Facebook, not even by us.
Right.
I mean, not exactly by Instagram and Facebook, but by softwares who are linked to Instagram and Facebook.
So that would be like a later date return on that. Like it's not something you cannot calculate that from the beginning and say we're going to get this. Yeah.
It changes on it changes. So when your reach increases, when your engagement increases, etc., this value changes. But you basically have tools to let you know how much a page is valued.
Right. Right.
And these tools are public, so the clients can see them.
Interesting. But that was understood from the beginning that was going to be, if there's a revenue source, it would come from that kind of.
So when we started in 2016, we didn't go that far. Like, it was a side project, and we were like, cool. But kind of 9 months or 9 months or 1 year working on Labneh and Fast, we were like, okay, what now?
Yeah.
If we want to make it grow, we need to find a revenue stream.
Right.
And that was one of the first one, yes.
You know, I'm asking you fairly personal questions about this because the passion is clear, right? Everyone I've met in this world is very determined. What I don't understand really is the financials, and because traditional media has that in the bag, I mean, it's like a default that there is a revenue stream just from traditional advertising. Does that, in a way, is that looked at? Is it frowned upon in this alternative media world that we don't want to go that route? We'd rather be more independent. And
I think you have people who would argue for, and you would have people who argue against. It really depends on your model and what you're trying to do. Traditional advertising, I mean, as long as you have people who pay to put some content in your page, if these people are powerful, they can put pressure in terms of editorial on you, right?
Right.
But this happened with traditional media, and this happens also with new ones. Like that's
right.
It's like having a company. When you have people who put in money, they have some power.
So investors are investors. Doesn't mean
yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So what's important is that either you have a variety of investors aware of what a media is, and basically they let you live. Either you have a variety of media with different sources of income, and then you can have a more global perspective.
And I always thought that was the role alternative media that was the gap alternative media initially was filling, was the areas that traditional media could not touch.
Yep, that's true. But
at the end of the day, the same financial problem emerges. I'm assuming that there's going to be some politics involved.
Some politics, or you can go to subscribers, right? So you can ask for subscribers to pay. So we're free. We're totally free because we also do believe that if you make people pay for information, you actually create elites, and you don't allow people who don't have money to have information that matters for them. What we had in mind when we started thinking about the business model is a mixed model like The Guardian. So The Guardian is free for everyone.
With that very obvious...
True, we're going to try not to make it that obvious. But basically you have people who pay for
or Wikipedia,
stuff.
I think, does it from time to time as well, yeah.
But they also produce content for others. They also have advertising. They also have a foundation. They have a mix of revenues. And even the New York Times or the Washington Post, etc., every media has a mixed streams of revenue. And that's been almost the same since the beginning, at least for print media. TV is a bit different, but yeah.
And there's no print version of
No.
Lebanese fats. But I guess that's been a dying thing for everybody. It's not...
I don't know if it's, I mean, it is, I don't know if it's totally dying. Yes, it's not as big as it used to be.
yeah.
But when, I don't know.
It'd be very odd if you're protesting holding the paper.
That would be a beautiful way to protest.
That would be, yeah.
It would be.
People put their phones down, they take out the newspaper.
We can create a revolution like this.
Well,
but,
you might end the revolution by accident, yeah. Women are front and center of this movement. And women are front and center with or without the movement. But this movement, they are at least superficially, right? You see it on TV, you see it on social media. Women are playing a big part. Can you imagine, maybe years from now, let's be a bit pessimistic, not months, not weeks, years, that simple things like nationality issues or divorce issues, things that affect women first and foremost, do you think these are going to be changed for the better anytime soon? And I'm wondering what kind of achievements biggest population in Lebanon can hope for in the near future.
I mean, let's be clear, I'm extremely privileged in terms of my education and stuff like this. I was privileged in terms of, for a very long time, I never felt discrimination as a woman in this country. Like, I even felt pretty privileged. Like, let's be clear, like
As a woman?
As a woman, for a very long time.
What do you mean by that?
I could work wherever I wanted. I never faced, at least in Lebanon, sexual harassment as I could have faced in New York, actually. Like, obviously, there are people catcalling in the street, etc., but it's not the same level of harassment or actually of danger than the one that I lived in New York or in Paris. Like, I was less...
You felt safer as a woman here
than abroad.
Okay, that's interesting.
And that's and I'm including Paris and I'm including New York. No, actually, the Arab world was pretty safe for me at that time, but I was more like the GCC countries, etc.
So at least on a social level, there's a comfort.
There is a comfort, and there is like, I never felt discriminated against because I was a woman.
Even with knowing that at least some of your rights are denied.
Yes.
But you still felt...
Because also I have a very supportive family, and who's very... I have a very supportive family who never told me I couldn't do something because I was a woman, right? I have two brothers, so anything that my brothers did, if I wanted to do the same, I could. So...
I'm sorry for bringing up the go-to example, but let's say you were to marry an American man and bring him home, knowing that you cannot have Lebanese children.
Yeah.
There's nothing that protection could do for that.
True.
Because that's outside of that whole...
True.
But those issues did not affect you personally at that time?
No.
Okay.
No, they didn't. But this is why I say I'm privileged, like,
Yes,
because I have extremely supportive family, I had supportive friends, so that's kind of a bubble, right?
Yeah.
But then actually what happened is that I became a madame. Sorry. But that's actually true.
What do you mean?
In this country, I reach an age where basically people, like men, etc., call me madame, not mademoiselle anymore. The whole level of respect I got just by being a madame, even though I'm not married, I don't have kids, right? But the whole level of respect I got when I turned kind of 38, 39, 40, etc., just by being a madame, was mind-blowing to me. I'm like, oh...
Respect in a good way or
in a good way?
In a good way.
Like, when I ask for something at the bank or in the not in the office, in a shop or whatever it is, it's like no one tries to argue with me, no one tries to flirt with me, no one tries to convince me that my decision is not good. I was like, wow. Life became easier in a lot of small details. Like, I got a respect that I never had before, but I never realized that I didn't have it before. Which, it's very subtle.
But that sounds more like a almost like an honorary title. You know, it's like you've reached adulthood.
Yeah, and I procreated and I have kids and I did my duty.
Yes, but okay, I'm going to ask it a different way. These things, I think, they seem to be enshrined, whether it's economic prosperity or economic decline, whether the country's at war or at peace, what you're describing, at least to me, without being a woman, seems to be intact. That women are given that kind of respect
after a certain age. But then what I realized with the second part of it is this respect is actually confined to a woman's place. We started a company here. Try dealing with the banker for the company. Try dealing with the lawyer for the company. Try dealing with men, actually, who tell you how to do your job better than you do it.
So the business aspect of being a woman.
Yep. Try getting a loan when you actually don't have properties in your name, because the properties go to men, even though you had the equivalent in money or whatever it is.
Yeah.
This is, even though I'm extremely privileged, I still don't have the same opportunities that men can have, because I don't have access to property, because there is a certain level of condescendence towards women. Like, that's cultural stuff, right?
I like these examples more than the
Madame
traditional
stuff.
examples. No, not that one. I mean, divorce is messy for men and women.
Yeah.
Maybe a little messier for women. The nationality thing is a problem, because that's basic, right? Your nationality is not passed through you. But I like these examples of just day-to-day affairs of wanting to do your job. Or
you go to a bank, you ask for a loan because you want to create your company. They ask you for collateral, even though they're not supposed to ask for collaterals. You have nothing in your name.
And this, in your opinion, is only because you're a woman. That's basically the gender is the issue. Yeah.
That's literally because, like, in all fairness or whatever it is, like in this country, men are supposed to inherit properties and women get the equivalent in money if the family's fair.
But something easy like that, right? The way you're treated as a woman and you're being pressured to do more than your fair share, is that something that this revolution can change? Is it even in the mix? Because it's not privileged women that are on the street.
No, it's everyone.
It's everyone. And maybe the privileged are less visible this time around. It's just the average person.
Yep.
Average meaning economically. There's nothing. These are not the wealthy elite.
Yep,
right? It's women. Period.
For having talked with a lot of women entrepreneurs, because you have more and more women entrepreneurs, these women tell you, no, how do we get the money? How do we get?
Yeah.
We don't have property so that we can back up our stuff. That's a real problem that we're all facing. And apart from the respect, because respect is also a kind of perception sometimes. So that's also different, right? Like, you can fight your way through respect. You can do stuff.
Well, I meant respect, at least in terms of the bank would not be prejudiced against you for being a woman. That they would say, no, she has the means, therefore she can do it. I meant respect in the lowest form, meaning this person has income and assets, therefore we can do business.
Yeah, no, because we don't have collateral.
Yeah. So that is a foundational problem.
That's a foundational problem. I mean, they're not supposed to ask for collateral in the first place. That's the real problem.
But you, your example, right? You're a self-made person, man or woman. I mean, you're not. You pursued your education, came back, and wanted to start something on your own with a friend. You're not really demanding much, right? If you have the income, if you have the assets, you want to start something. It shouldn't be that complicated. Now, you did it anyway. Can you see something like this being easier a few years from now for someone in your place?
No, that requires a change in culture. That takes time.
So this is not necessarily a cultural revolution for
I think it's the start of one. I really think it's the start of one because it's women asking for basic rights during these protests, and there were many women. Like, it wasn't just some active.
Absolutely.
Some activists. It was not the regular activists who were down in the streets. Were so many women asking for just basic rights. It should change of mindset. At least it's the start of. Not saying that we're going to have results in some years or in 2 years or whatever. But when you talk to young women these days, a lot of them are aware of this because actually they see their mother struggle with this, right? You have more women my age now that are trying to work
You're
and
being a
make
little
it.
too hard on yourself.
But
We're the same age. We're not old.
Actually, I think I'm a bit older than you are.
We're in our late 30s.
I'm a bit older than
I
you
was
are.
trying to be nice.
Very late 30s, yes. We're very young, but still.
But you're right. The youth factor is astonishing. The
Yep.
average, at times, the average protester could be half our age,
Oh, yes.
and
Definitely.
they're more excited than we are.
Yes.
For the moment. But you see it there that these, let's say, these men and women, that they can translate this to political power for women.
Slowly, but surely. But slowly, but surely.
Yeah.
There has been, but the change is not just like coming just from the protest out of the blue. It's also like women getting more educated for the past years, and also women working more than before.
Yeah.
And in a way, like when you're a woman and you want to work in a company and they actually pay you half of what they pay your male counterpart, or they don't even give you a job because they expect you to get pregnant and forget about the job.
Yeah.
At one point you want to go and create your own stuff, even though it's a small, like, one-woman shop.
Yeah.
And then you realize that it's actually more complicated for you than for your cousin or whatever, or you actually need the help of your cousin and because he's a male and he can help you with that.
Yeah.
These are women basically my age and a bit older, etc., who are now raising the next generation. And who are aware of this very small practical stuff, not talking about the big respect stuff that I talked about before. That's very theoretical, but practical stuff. I don't have collateral. So again, the real problem is that banks are asking for a collateral, and that should change.
Yeah.
But because of what happened, like it's...
But I like that you're describing women being raised by women who are the leaders in that era, right? I don't think our parents are the pioneers in women's employment in Lebanon. It's really our generation that decided to push against that.
Yes.
The younger generation is used to it. They take it for granted. And I think going over and over this conversation the last 2 months, I really think it is the young generation that doesn't have the concerns that we had.
Definitely.
And that seems to fall into everything. Economics, politics, gender increasingly, like you said. And I like your reservation about time. I agree with you. This is a slow-moving...
It's a very slow-moving stuff.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it takes a generation, basically.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Now, you're the facts of Labneh facts. Although Labneh doesn't strike me as emotion, per se. It's just something you eat, and it's...
Yeah, but it's emotion. It's like Labneh is Lebanese. It's the thing that you miss most when you travel abroad and stuff like that.
The facts you try to forget when you leave, just how bad it is.
Come on, it's good.
Although the diaspora seems to be as excited, if not more excited, about what's happening. About facts. And you said it earlier that you're a fact checker by default and you take it seriously. This world of alternative media, it's a self-regulating ecosystem where people are doing it on their own. They're vetting themselves. They're vetting their information as much as they can. It's almost like there's no way to do it except you have to make it a principle. No one's telling you otherwise. And yet, Megaphone has a post on Instagram. Labneh Facts has a post on Instagram. Some random site has a post on Instagram. To me, as somebody not well versed in the journalism world, they still have the same weight. Unless I have an emotional tie to that name, Megaphone or Labneh Facts or anything. It could be even bigger. New York Times, right? Washington Post, and some odd site that has a post. I am still going to look at that other site, and I'm going to digest that information. And if I'm careful, I may be extra cautious with the information, but usually I don't take the time to be extra cautious. Once I've digested that information, it's sunk in. And as a fact checker, as somebody who takes facts seriously, I'm not asking you to, the obligation is not on you, but because you're self-proclaimed fact checker, is it something that can be remedied in a way that at least the consumer has a way to at least catch what could be erroneous, what could be not fake news, but let's just say not well-vetted information, that it's just loose information, and it's information that I could produce. All I need, and you said it, Instagram, all I need is a photo and some text.
Yeah.
I'm a journalist, and at the same time I'm not. So what, not the producer, the consumer, in your opinion, what are ways to at least turn more into the more honest than the chaos of the internet?
That's the billion-dollar question. And that's a question that every media is asking themselves, at least in the developed world these days. There is a huge problem of people not knowing how to read information. We have a problem of actually education of the public to journalism, to basic journalism. Like, yes, we produce journalism and we have some rules in terms of how we produce this, but people are not aware of these rules.
The content producers.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's, as a journalist, like the first lesson, actually, basically, as a journalist, is basically a fact is confirmed, like a fact to be true, to be considered true, needs to be confirmed by two independent sources. Okay, two sources who don't know each other, who don't belong to the same party, etc.
Yeah.
First rule. Otherwise, it's not a fact. It's something to be checked or to be verified.
Yeah.
Second rule is, sometimes one expert is enough, but yeah. Second rule is you put context into all this, right? And journalism hasn't changed since the dawn of time. That's basically the job that we have to do. The thing is, today, very often you don't see the sources mentioned in any article. I mean, the New York Times still does the effort, The Guardian also, etc. But on social media, you don't have space to put the sources, like very basic stuff, or you don't take the time to.
There's no pressure to put sources.
And there is no pressure to put the source, and people are not aware of this, right?
Right.
So what happens a lot on social media, but also with traditional media, who doesn't function in a very ethical way or a very proper way, is that people are going to trust writers or journalists or someone that they know. So what happens a lot on social media, but also with traditional media, is that people are going to trust journalists who actually say stuff that they kind of already agree with. We like to be challenged, but just a bit. Like you cannot. It's actually very difficult to have a conversation with someone who really doesn't agree with you. Seriously, you can. And then, as a media consumer, as someone who consumes like information, when you will have information or a piece of news that contradicts your view on the word, and actually it's more that contradict your moral values of the word. You will not believe it. You will have all the mechanism like coming here and basically telling you that this is bullshit.
Right.
And there is a word for this. I think it's called moral foundation theory or moral values theory. It's actually fascinating. It's about how liberal and Democrats have very strong values that they kind of understand the word with, and if things are against these values, they're gonna react very violently, kind of towards these things. So there is a whole theory about that. But what I'm trying to say is that as consumer of information, we will be very quick to find information that validates what we believe in, and very quick to dismiss information that doesn't validate what we believe in.
Yeah.
And we do that whether we're for the Thawra or against the Thawra, like from both sides, okay? And that's basically media education. That's basically first learning how to check if this is information or opinion, because a lot of people actually don't know the difference between information and opinion. And second, the values. What are your values?
But the second one is impossible to. I mean, that's an internal struggle to reassess your values when you're looking at information that goes against your values. That seems to be
That's very hard.
it's very hard, and maybe people don't. Maybe the average person who's just flipping through the news doesn't have the time or the patience to examine themselves at each instant. The first one. How do you do it? Because I mean, to me, tweets are tweets, whether they're information or opinion. And I think, you correct me if I'm wrong, there's no flagging for opinion. It's not like...
No, a lot of opinions are passed by, like, a lot of people pretend that opinions are facts.
And sometimes the consumer doesn't know better, or they think of it as content, period.
Yeah.
So is there a way for somebody who just wants to follow the news, and especially at a time of emotion, where values are front and center, is there a way for the consumer to sort of take a step back and look at data and examine it? Or is it something that's just beyond an individual's control, that this is something that is bigger than one person looking at the news?
It is, I believe, an issue of public education. I mean, in school you learn French and English and economics. You should learn media literacy.
Which is not taught.
And I'm sure there are some countries where they teach it. I think, but in this country definitely not.
You're not talking about university, you're talking about schooling.
I'm talking schools. I'm talking like when you're 15 or 16, when you start to kind of understand the word, etc. Like, there should be some very, like, it's not that hard. I mean, seriously, the whole principles are very basic. It's just check the sources, check their source, and then it goes back to, do you trust the source? And that's something different. But check the source, because people these days have a trust issue with everything, right? But at least that's the first step.
Checking the source of a photo on Instagram seems so... It's very hard for me to imagine doing it. Even though I agree with you that that's the effort one has to make. But picture of something on fire is going to impact me whether it's real or not. And if it is impacting me on something that I believe in or I'm against, it'll mean all the more. And that's it. The subtext is secondary. And I think that's an unfortunate contribution to new media. Because that's not alternative media, that's not citizen journalism, that's just technology has allowed us to communicate in absolute ways.
In a very fast way, with actually no time to cool down, actually.
Right.
Like, we don't have time to react with anger or with emotion, etc.
Sure.
We don't step back. We don't say, let's breathe first and then check.
I've many times heard people referencing posts as opposed to news. Mm-hmm. And I mean, you said it earlier, WhatsApp is being used effectively. I was lucky because you invited me to a talk that you were one of the panelists talking about WhatsApp. I would never trust anything on WhatsApp, and that's maybe the only filter that I have.
Thank you.
No, but that's WhatsApp is chatting. And chatting is all the BS you want in a chat. Mm-hmm. And it's just, I don't take it seriously. But it's startling to know that people are using WhatsApp for news.
Yeah.
Does Labneh, in fact, turn to WhatsApp for news?
So that's been on the... we've been wanting to...
Because you thanked me, and I assume that's... thanking me as in it's a
good thing that you're not trusting anything that you have on WhatsApp that you get on WhatsApp. WhatsApp, like, we wanted to do something with WhatsApp, like to share information, like, for example, information from Labneh, in fact, on WhatsApp to people who would want to receive information from us. Never done it for... basically actually for resources reason, like we never had the time to do that.
Right.
Also, personally, I don't check my WhatsApp anymore, or it's not that I don't check it. I check. I have a lot of group.
Yeah.
Sometimes I don't even read what's happening in the groups because, like, khalas. If anything is really important, I know that someone will tell me at one point.
So it's interesting. There is an automatic line with WhatsApp, and maybe the majority feel the same way. That line is not including Instagram, because I think Instagram may be a bit of a blurry... It's a blurred area. A photo on Instagram to me is more legitimate than a WhatsApp photo.
But usually it's like...
and then a WhatsApp story, for example.
there is a validation stuff when you make it public.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's the same company. It's all one company doing this. But the mind, I think, has a way of... There's something about WhatsApp that's just too loose. It's too much the jungle. It
is a jungle.
It is a jungle, yeah. It's a frontier that's just boundless.
Yeah.
Let's project and say that this is the crash right now. And a couple of months, maybe a year or two, the economic pain will not be as acute.
Yeah.
Do you see the politics, the desire for political change diminishing as a result of economic growth? And what I'm getting at is, I was very startled by this revolution. October 16, I was laughing at the WhatsApp tax. It may have been October 17 itself.
October 17,
in the morning.
Yes,
October 17. The fires were enough to set people, to ignite anger and send people to the streets. It didn't happen. But the WhatsApp tax was the final point. Still astonished at that moment. And it may unfortunately be because the economic problem is so bad. But had it not been that bad, would people have demanded change the way they're...
No, they wouldn't. Like, let's be clear, the VAT tax, 10 to 11%. So there were some protests, right?
Yeah.
But things were not as bad.
Yeah.
They demanded a bit of change, but then, khalas, we've been, when we started Labneh, in fact...
The trash crisis.
Trash crisis, it wasn't...
Yeah.
But when we started Labneh, in fact, it was to actually inspire to do change, okay? And before the revolution started, we were actually losing hope. Let's be clear. We were like, nothing's going to change this country, and khalas. And what do we do now on a personal level? Because it's actually pretty tiring to work for change and see that nothing happens.
Yeah.
The level of apathy, kind of, or the level of people not moving was huge. And then WhatsApp triggered the whole thing, which for me was like, seriously, WhatsApp triggered it? But for my 20-year-old friend, they were like, no, but that's normal. Like, I always live with free communications. I cannot live without free communications. And we're like, okay, if that's what it took to trigger it, I don't care. But at least now, because the situation is so dire, there is a bit of a hope for change, right? If something happens, if we get bailed out, etc., and in 2 years' time, will we have the same level of political engagement? I don't think so, because it's actually way easier to destroy than to build, right?
Absolutely. And for better or worse, people were coping with the abnormal politics of this part of the world for a very long time, in particular the Lebanese way of
doing things,
interacting, whatever you want to call it, power sharing, that people, multiple generations have dealt with it. But the economic pain seems to be the core of the issue.
Yeah.
I'm a bit concerned about, once things start improving, that the appetite for change will just naturally diminish. The inertia will kick in. You said it earlier, you want a secular state. It's good to try something else if it's not going to be a sectarian state, or if it's something in the middle or anything, it's good to try something new, because this model doesn't seem to work. Even though power sharing may not be a bad idea the motive is not corrupt. The motive is actually an attempt, and it was an old attempt. It lingered. It seemed to satisfy enough people long term. But if it's not working the way it was meant to, it's worth changing. But I can't see it, and I can't see people even thinking about changing the model if money is a little more available again. And I don't want to be too hard on the protesters, because I know the protesters are doing it for dignity. It's more than just taxes and corruption. It's dignity. But
I think that this is what happens with all protests or revolutions. It's like, usually, from what I know, like, it's a conjuncture of stuff. Like, right, like, for example, in Lebanon, you cannot deny that the alternative political groups or the political activists of like these past years since the You Stink movement have been very active in terms of trying to change the narrative, trying to say, hey, the politicians are corrupt, etc. But all this is not enough if you don't have a crisis, if you don't have an economic crisis where people are like, let's go down in the streets, right?
Right.
But then what happened, I think, with these protests is that people are really aware of how bad the situation is. And that even if you don't want the system to change or whatever, I think that people are more aware than before that the politicians at least are corrupt. Maybe that the system functions, but the politicians are corrupt. I don't know.
Which is a positive
Which is already
change.
a positive change.
Yeah,
like,
my communal leader is as toxic as that community's leadership.
or maybe not as toxic, but also a bit toxic, and that's not necessarily a good thing because.
Yeah,
and that's already a good start.
That's true. Yeah,
And that's already a good start. Like.
I was startled by Tripoli. Tripoli seems to have done something really courageous. They were the first to say we're out.
We're out.
Now I don't know if the rest of the country appreciated what they did as much because it seems to have different levels, different geographies. But Tripoli sort of raised its hand, saying we're ready.
Yeah. And Nabati.
Nabati did too. Very brave people dared. But that's a month and a half, 2 months ago.
And now people are getting tired.
Yeah.
And this is basically like, I think it's basic, how do you say that? Management of crisis for dictators or something like this.
Yeah, wait it out.
Wait it out.
Yeah.
They have the means to wait it out. We don't.
That's true. So the positive moment is that we're all looking inward and we're trying to hold our leadership to account. We're not afraid to call people corrupt.
Yeah.
Even when it has to do with the old way of governing. That sects can look at their sectarian leaders and say that they're as bad. Maybe worse, maybe better, but everyone's bad.
Yeah.
That's changed. But beyond that, not much has sunk in.
In terms of?
Translating these 2 months of demonstrations into a different social pact. A new Lebanon, what revolutions do bring in, a different country. The word revolution to me, and I'm embarrassed here, I have high expectations for that word, but I've been scolded at. At the beginning, too hesitant to say this is a revolution.
Oh, journalistically speaking, it's still not.
I want this to be a revolution.
This is why we're all saying Thawra.
Yeah, and we're saying it, wanting it.
Yeah, but
and
it's still not.
Kind of like this whole time we've been talking, there's that quote that I've been rereading over and over.
Sorry.
And it says, no, because it fits the moment. It says, create the things you wished existed. That is exactly what I see in the Sauda sign. In Martyrs Square, the giant fist, and Sauda lil Watan. That's exactly what we want.
Yep.
And you know what? It gets burned down. We put it back, version 2.0.
That was beautiful.
Yeah, it's beautiful, but it's also showing exactly how far we are from it. Because all it is a sign at the end of the day. And maybe it's in the right direction, but it's not there. We're nowhere near the finish line.
No, we're not. A revolution, technically speaking, is when the power is in place, or the structural power, like the structure of the power in place, gets changed for a long period of time. Like they get basically not destroyed, but get torn down,
overthrown,
and then overthrown, and then something else comes into place and stays for some time. That's a revolution. So
Absolutely.
You cannot say that it's a revolution before it happened. You actually say it after.
Yeah.
I believe that one of the biggest misconception of change is that it happens overnight, or is it happens fast. It takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
And do these revolts or protests or revolution or Thawra end up in basically overhauling the whole system right now and creating something new?
Yeah.
I don't know, right? Chances are not completely, because first because inside a lot of people are afraid of what would happen if we have something totally secular, and I can understand the fear, let's be clear.
Yeah.
But also because unfortunately we're not the only ones deciding, right? And I hate the whole thing, like where it's the powers that, like the outside powers that decide. No, that's not totally true, but there is some truth in it. Like there is some pressure somewhere. If we have a government that doesn't agree with the interest of I don't know who, what will happen? That's the question that I asked, right?
Yeah.
It's these kinds of moments where you can feel the wheels of history turning, but they're not here yet. And you have new actors coming into place, kind of, because we still haven't seen a lot of them. And you
From the protests, you mean?
Yes, and from, I mean, just the protester, just the street is a new actor.
That's true.
Right?
That is true. A leaderless actor.
A leaderless actor, but still a new actor.
That's true. An actor that seems to have some authority.
So.
For the moment.
Yep.
Yeah.
And who changed the rules of the game.
That's true.
Just a bit.
Right.
So, this new actor, will he win the game right now? I'm not sure. But are they changing the game? Hopefully, yes.
Yeah.
Even though it will change in 20 years. Or 5. We don't know. No one knows, which is pretty impressive. Right?
I think this is the first time I've seen a true individual citizenship spirit.
Yes, I agree. And it's beautiful to watch.
It's beautiful, and I know that people, when they're waving the flag, they mean it now. It's not just for show. There's some pride in being a citizen of this country, and I've never seen it. And individual citizenship, as long as that's front and center to this story, I think the momentum will always be there. And individual responsibility in a country like Lebanon these things don't go hand in hand. Communal fear, which is what you said, power sharing, communal dealings, that seems to be the story of Lebanon. And for the last 2.5 months, the narrative shifted a bit. So long as they have the information necessary to punish local leaders for incompetence, for corruption, for thievery, for all the bad things that drove you away from this country, which drove too many people away from this country, which unfortunately killed many people in Lebanon. I think so long as the average Lebanese has the support necessary to challenge local leadership, maybe down the road that's the only way to get rid of what we're used to in this country, from the bottom up. The best thing that happened in this whole revolt movement was كلون يعني كلون.
That's I love this.
Yeah, and even if we lose it, even if it doesn't materialize, I think looking back on that, at least we know that we got it right, that we're all in this together.
And it didn't turn violent.
It didn't turn violent, yeah. And hopefully it doesn't. Marie-Jose, thank you.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure.